So these are the Knowledge Zenith ZEX, ZEX. I still don't understand Knowledge Zenith's naming scheme, but yeah. Anyway, this unit was sent in by a store, like an official store from Lazada, from what I know. We'll leave a link to that down below. We don't get anything from that link. It's literally just a link to the store itself. We were sent this unit in exchange for a review, but we were told to just do whatever kind of review we wanted, and we only ever accept reviews or review units if we're allowed to say anything we want. So yeah, and you guys know that I don't really hold back my punches when I review things. And yeah, so first of all, I would like to clear out a little bit of air around these ZEX. So these ZEX were quite anticipated because they were supposed to use an electrostatic driver for $15, and that's just impossible. So I haven't taken these apart yet, but I think somebody already has, or I would assume somebody is going to, but I'm calling it now that I'm pretty sure these are not electrostatic drivers, because you simply cannot drive electrostatic drivers from your phone. You will need a proper electrostatic amplifier in order to do that, because electrostatic drivers require massive amounts of electricity, high voltage, which your phone simply won't be able to provide. Now, these, I suspect, are probably using the same kind of technology that the Shure tape were using. They also marketed them as like electrostatic, but in reality they were magnetostatic drivers. I'm gonna be killing every pronunciation that I'm gonna say about strange things here. But yeah, that's it. I just wanted to clear the air on that. These are most definitely not electrostatic drivers. I'm pretty confident on that. So yeah. And now, with that out of the way, they also don't look like electrostatic drivers. No, not okay. But now with that out of the way, we'll just start off with the sound. And as we usually do, I'll just start off with with bass. I'm not gonna waste much time on this. The bass on the Knowledge ZEX, okay, it is quite emphasized, but contrary to what we normally get with Knowledge Z, the bass is actually somewhat controlled. Surprise, surprise! Right, it has more mid bass than it does sub bass. The extension isn't that great. Like the very low octaves of sub bass, you won't be able to clearly hear on these. The rumbles on that is a bit weak, right? But in turn, you get quite well controlled bass, and I'll take that instead. I suppose. The bass speed on these are more medium to slightly fast in terms of side, and it does have like slight bleed into the mids, and there's a bit of a problem as well in the bass where the upper bass region, to the lower mids, feels kind of muddy and boomy at times, right? So that can be quite distracting quite a lot of times, right? But aside from that, the bass in general I would say is quite acceptable for this price, and it does still have like at least quite a smidgen of texture compared to the usually very one-notey, very boomy Knowledge Zeniths that we know of. This muddiness that I described in the upper bass to lower mid region can be very distracting in lots of songs, especially if they're fast songs. But for some reason I find them to be quite pleasing for rock songs. I don't know why that is. Still trying to figure that one out. But yeah, so if you don't mind a little bit of muddiness, right, and I think you're gonna be fine, especially if you come from like the other Knowledge Zeniths like ZSN, ZST and stuff. I think this is still miles better than those two. So yeah. Now, speaking of the mids, like I previously mentioned, there's a bit of bleed into the mid range. The lower mids can feel a bit muddy at times, and in general the mid range does feel a bit recessed. Right, but it's not nowhere near as recessed as the other models for Knowledge Zenith in this price range, again, like the ZSN and ZST. And in general, I don't really hate the mids. The mids are a bit recessed. They're not exactly thick. They're a bit more on the leaner side of things, I would say. The texture on them is quite alright, surprisingly. And the upper mid regions can be a bit can be a bit stringent at times. Like they can be a bit aggressive at times, and I believe this has something to do with the driver. This, I don't know what this magnetostatic or whatever driver this will turn out to be. It kind of sounds like a BA sort of, or it's just a bit sharper than what a normal dynamic driver presentation would normally give you, right? Even on sharper dynamic drivers, this feels a bit different. It feels a bit metallic at times to me. It's not that bad at all, but that's what I can describe it best as. Okay. Overall, the mid-range is, I think, it's quite fine for this price. If mid-range is not as important for you, I think, and if you're looking at a Chronology Zenith, this is still one of the better, way better ones that you can get from Chronology Zenith. So that's something. Now, when we talk about the treble, right, which is probably the best part of this, and also, although I say best part of it, it doesn't mean that it's that much better compared to the bass. I would say it's just slightly better than the bass in general, because albeit it being way better tuned compared to the normal Chronology Zeniths, which are just extremely sibilant and sharp and whatnot, it still has its own problems, right? It's still emphasized, nowhere near as other Chronology Zenith models, but it's not that sharp. It feels a bit softened up actually, right? But it is peaky. I'll admit that it's quite peaky actually, and you'll notice this especially in the sibilant region, right? So somewhere around like before 8,000 kilohertz, it feels dampened, but then above and below that feels quite emphasized. It can get quite annoying. Cymbal crashes and whatnot can feel dull at times. Higher end ones will still carry quite a bit of energy. Lower ones will still carry quite a bit of energy, but somewhere in that like less than 8K region, I think it's like 7.5 or 7K region, feels quite off, right? So sibilance is much of a problem in these, but anything above that, like above or below that, can be quite energetic at times. Overall, I would say it's still quite listenable, but it can feel a bit odd at times, and I would accept this any day of the week compared to the usual Chronology Zenith treble that we all know and love or absolutely hate. So yeah, it's somewhere in between, I would say. Now, the treble does feel a bit incohesive sometimes with it working with the dynamic driver, right? But it's not too bad. It's completely acceptable, I would say, especially in this price range. So yeah. Now, soundstage and imaging is where the ZEX kind of falls apart. If this were my head, right, the soundstage of the ZEX are at best half my head. In terms of depth, it also isn't that much better. It's not that great. Imaging is also only about, I was only able to get an accuracy for like 50 degrees at best. So it's not the best for this kind of, you know, work. So yeah. Now, I'm also gonna gloss over the build quality now before we get into the comparison section. Because I didn't get the whole production package actually. I only got like a case with some ear tips and these. And from what I've been sent, at least, right? I got a few pair of ear tips. I got, what is it? 4 pairs of ear tips. These are the normal, like new horrible Chronology Zenith ear tips. They don't really seal well. I would suggest you try and change up, especially if you can't get a proper seal in your ears. These ear tips are definitely a contributor to that. I'm not able to get a proper seal with any of those except for one of these, which is the harder version of all of these ear tips. Thing is, I'm not certain that you're gonna be getting this ear tip. This is the first time I've seen this ear tip. It's a bit of a balance between like the Chronology Zenith star lines and this new generation of ear tips that Chronology Zenith is putting out. So yeah. Now, in terms of build quality, right? The shell is based off of the regular Chronology Zenith inner shell. with the nozzle being quite standard. It isn't exactly shallow insertion depth, it's a bit deeper compared to shallow insertion depth, I would say. The nozzle feels a bit smaller compared to the usual nozzles that we get. But like my SpinFit CP100s, the new ones, like brand new off the shelf, fit just okay on these. Ear tips that are slightly bigger don't really fit well on these, so keep that in mind. Even the ear tips that you get with these, they just fit just right on these, like unless you use the other ones, because they have notches in them which work together with the nozzle here. So yeah, just keep that in mind. The outside shell here looks very pretty, I can tell you that. The model that we currently have is the rose gold variant. I think it looks very pretty. It feels to be made out of plastic and it's painted. I don't know if it'll chip or not, or if it's just, or if the whole thing is molded out of rose gold plastic. But it does look quite nice, I would say, for 15 bucks. The IM in general doesn't really feel that great. It's very lightweight, and you will definitely feel that it's, you know, it's a cheap IM. It's not the worst IM I've ever held, but it's definitely not premium feeling. I will tell you that. It looks quite okay, but it doesn't feel that great. The cable, though, I would say is definitely an improvement compared to the normal chronoline cables I've been getting over the years. This feels quite supple. It's not too microphonic. It works quite well. You can supposedly get a microphone version, like you usually can. And in general, I don't have much complaints about this cable. This cable is okay. Like I prefer this over the old chronoline cables that you got, aesthetically and functionality wise. Although for some reason we don't get a chin slider here, which is a bit annoying. But at least they also maintain the angle jack, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now, for comparisons, okay, I'm gonna be comparing it to something that their child brand or partner brand or whatever you want to call them, CCA, put out, right? So CCA put out something similar with the same configuration. They use a dynamic driver and a electrostatic driver, right? So compared to the NRA, okay, the NRA actually in general is leaner in base. It has slightly better control compared to the ZEX. The NRA doesn't have the mud and boominess of the ZEX, but the NRA is quite brighter. It is quite brighter, but it also feels a little less peaky to my ears. So as a trade-off, right, it's a bit brighter, but it's less peaky. The NRA I can't really listen to for that long of a period of a time, because it can get quite annoying because of how bright it is compared to the ZEX. But the NRA isn't too overly bright. I would say it's just my ears being overly sensitive, right? So if you can handle treble, right? If you can handle treble, especially if you're probably coming from like the ZST or the ZEX or something, I mean ZSN, then I think maybe the NRA might be a better option. If you are looking for softer sound, I never imagined I would say this again, right? The ZEX might be a better option actually. And again, for some reason, I quite enjoy rock on these, even with that upper mid and not upper mid, upper bass and lower mid muddiness and boominess. For some reason, it works kind of with rock for me. So yeah. Aside from that, one thing I did want to point out that I forgot to point out is the NRA does have better imaging, but it has even less soundstage and depth compared to the ZEX. So if soundstage and depth is somewhat important to you, you might want the ZEX more compared to the NRA. But if imaging is that much more important to you, then get the NRA, because I feel the NRA just has better imaging. So yeah, I think that does it for this review. All in all, I would say Knowledge Zenith has been quite killing it this year. At least from the items that we've been reviewing, the ZEX, the ZAS, the DQ6 have been pretty decent IEMs in their respective price points. And I would just like to see where they're going. Maybe they're just on a lucky streak. We'll see. And I think that's about it. I'll see you guys next time.